57 years ago, a guy sat down and wrote out your life. Every detail. The phone in your pocket. The cameras watching you. The rent you can't afford. The shootings on the news. The corporations running everything. He wrote it all down in 1968 and said it in 2010. His name was John Brunner. The book was Stand on Zanzibar. And when 2010 came around, people realized something disturbing. He got it right. Almost everything. 7 billion people crushing the planet. China as an economic giant. A unified Europe with one currency. President named Abomi. Terrorist attacks on American buildings. School shootings. Legal weed and banned cigarettes. Electric cars everywhere. AI making decisions we don't understand. He saw it all coming before the internet even existed. But here's what keeps me up at night. The book didn't stop at 2010. The warnings go way beyond that. And we're living through them right now in 2025. Everything he predicted would happen if we didn't change course is happening. And most people have never even heard his name. This video breaks down what Brunner saw, how he knew, and what's coming next if these trends keep going. If you want more content like this, hit subscribe. Now let's talk about the manuscript that predicted everything. Who was this guy and what did he write? John Brunner was nobody special. British sci-fi writer. Pumped out space novels and alien stories through the 50s and 60s. Standard pulp stuff that nobody remembers. Then something shifted in the mid-60s. Maybe it was the drugs in the air. Maybe it was Vietnam tearing society apart. Maybe he just started paying attention differently. Whatever happened, in 1968 he wrote Stand on Zanzibar, and it was nothing like his other work. The book won the Hugo Award, science fiction's biggest prize. Critics loved it, but nobody in 1968 could have known they weren't reading fiction. They were reading a documentary from 40 years in the future. Brunner didn't write this book like a normal novel. The structure is chaotic. Multiple storylines cutting between each other. Fake commercials. News snippets. Random conversations. Quotes from a made-up sociologist. It feels like drowning in information from every direction at once. Sound familiar? That's because he was showing you what it feels like to live in 2025. In 1968, before cable news, before the internet, before your brain got rewired by constant notifications, he somehow knew what information overload would feel like decades before it happened. The plot follows two roommates in New York in 2010. Norman House is a black executive at a megacorporation called General Technics. Donald Hogan is undercover intelligence pretending to be a grad student. They're sharing an apartment because even though Norman pulls executive money, New York rent is so insane he needs a roommate. Does that sound like 2010? Does that sound like right now? Brunner saw the housing crisis coming 50 years out. But the story doesn't matter as much as the world. 7 billion people packed on a planet that's buckling. Corporations more powerful than countries. People so stressed they just snap and go on killing sprees Brunner calls mucking. Genetic engineering promising to perfect humans while raising nightmare questions. A supercomputer named Shalmaneser running things that humans can't fully understand anymore. Every single piece of this is real now. World population hit 7 billion in 2011. 1 year off. Corporate power is out of control. Mass shootings are a regular thing we've almost gotten numb to. Genetic engineering and AI are the biggest questions facing humanity. We're inside his prediction. Most people just don't know it. The title itself is a warning. Back in the early 1900s, someone figured out every human on Earth could stand shoulder to shoulder on the Isle of Wight, this little island off England. Brunner did the math for 2010's population and realized you'd need something way bigger. Zanzibar. Stand on Zanzibar. All of us pressed together. No room to breathe. Humanity suffocating under its own weight. How did he do it? Simple answer that's also terrifying. He paid attention. He looked at population growth trends, the spread of television, rising corporate power, technology getting more complex, social movements in the 60s, and he just followed those trends forward. He didn't predict magic. He predicted what happens when nothing changes. And nothing changed. We kept going exactly where we were headed. The predictions that actually happened. Let's get specific. These aren't vague guesses you can interpret any way you want. These are hard predictions Brunner made in 1968 about 2010. And they came true. Population hits 7 billion by 2010. Real date, October 2011. He was off by 1 year after calculating 42 years into the future. China becomes a world superpower. In 1968, China was isolated and in chaos. Cultural revolution. Nobody saw them becoming an economic giant. Brunner did. China's now the second biggest economy on Earth and makes most of the world's stuff. Europe forms a union with one currency. EU formed in 1993. Euro launched in 1999. Brunner called it decades early. President Obomi. There's a progressive president in the book named Obomi. Barack Obama got elected in 2009. One letter difference in the name. Written 40 years before Obama ran. That's not a lucky guess. Terrorist attacks on American buildings. Brunner described terrorism as a major U.S. concern with attacks on buildings. 9/11 happened in 2001. The whole security state that came after matches what he wrote. School shootings become common. Brunner invented muckers for people who snap and commit mass violence. Specifically mentioned schools. Columbine was 1999. Since then it's been constant. He saw this before the phenomenon existed. Weed gets legalized while cigarettes get stigmatized. Smoking rates crashed. Multiple states legalized marijuana. The whole drug culture shift happened exactly as he described. Home computers accessing world information. He didn't predict the internet's exact form, but he described what it does. Small computers at home pulling information from libraries worldwide. Interactive TV. Automated news. He got the function right using 1968 technology language. Gay rights go mainstream. The book shows gay and bisexual relationships as normal and accepted. Sexual performance drugs advertised openly. In 1968, being gay was illegal most places. Everything he predicted took 40 years to happen. Corporations more powerful than governments. General Technics in the book basically runs things. More influence than most countries. Look at Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft. They shape policy, control information, operate beyond any single government's reach. Brunner warned us. Electric vehicles take over. Motor vehicles running on electric fuel cells. Honda becoming a major car company. Tesla didn't exist until 2003. The EV revolution is happening now exactly as written. Detroit collapses. Brunner predicted Detroit's auto industry would fail. Detroit declared bankruptcy in 2013. Biggest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. Racial progress with ongoing tension. Black people in power positions after decades of affirmative action. Racial problems still simmering underneath. We elected a black president. Racism and inequality are still massive issues. He got both parts right. Housing crisis in major cities. Executives needing roommates for rent. Look at New York, San Francisco, LA. Even people with good jobs can't afford to live alone. Brunner described this in 1968. Satellite TV and multi-platform media. Characters called Mr. and Mrs. Everywhere appearing on multiple channels through satellites. Cable news people are now on TV, podcasts, YouTube, social media simultaneously. Satellite TV became standard in the 90s. Video calling becomes normal. Characters communicate through video connections. Video calls became common in the 2000s. COVID made them essential. Widespread anxiety medication. Mood-altering drugs everywhere in Brunner's world. Antidepressant and anti-anxiety med use has exploded. Millions of Americans take them daily. Environmental damage and climate concerns. Dying oceans. Toxic air. Resource depletion. Characters talk about it but don't act because corporate interests prevent change. Climate change is now the defining crisis. We've known for decades. We're still not doing enough. Just like Brunner showed. He didn't get lucky on one or two things. He systematically predicted the shape of our entire world. The accumulation is what makes it scary. This wasn't guessing. This was seeing. The warnings nobody listened to. Brunner wasn't trying to show off. He was trying to warn us. The world in Stand on Zanzibar isn't a cool future. It's a nightmare. Overpopulation, corporate control, environmental collapse, social breakdown. He was saying, this is where we're going if nothing changes. And nothing changed. Overpopulation is the core warning. 7 billion people straining every resource. Cities packed. Housing scarce. The psychological pressure of too many humans in too little space driving people insane. The mucker mass violence linked directly to overcrowding and stress. We hit 7 billion in 2011. We're at 8 billion now. Housing crisis is real. Overcrowding is real. Mass shootings are constant. Brunner told us and we kept going. Corporate power replacing government power. General Technics operates across borders, shapes policy, takes over entire countries. National governments can't control them because corporations are bigger, richer, faster. Look around. Tech companies control information for billions. They influence elections. They avoid taxes. They write their own rules. Governments can't keep up. Brunner warned this would happen if corporate power grew unchecked. We let it grow. Technology outpacing human understanding. Shalmaneser makes decisions humans can't comprehend. People trust it because they have no choice. The system is too complex to analyze. Right now, AI algorithms decide loans, job applications, criminal sentences, what content you see. Nobody can explain why the algorithm chose what it chose. Black boxes making decisions about your life. We trust them because we have to. Exactly what Brunner showed. Genetic engineering and human enhancement. The book shows a breakthrough in genetic optimization from a developing nation with different ethics. Characters struggle with questions. Should we enhance humans? Who decides what's better? What about people who can't afford it? These aren't hypothetical anymore. CRISPR makes gene editing easy and cheap. Designer babies are real. China already made gene-edited babies. The ethical nightmare Brunner described in 1968 is happening in labs right now. Surveillance everywhere. Characters live under constant monitoring. Movements tracked. Communications recorded. They've accepted it as normal for security. Edward Snowden proved in 2013 this is real. Government programs monitoring everything. Companies tracking every click, every purchase, every location through your phone. Most people just accept it. We carry the tracking devices willingly. The surveillance state arrived and we barely noticed. Environmental collapse, resource depletion, pollution, dying oceans, toxic air. Characters talk about it but don't act because economic pressure and corporate interests prevent change. Climate change is the crisis of our time. Oceans warming, air quality dangerous, Extreme weather constant. We've known for decades. We've done almost nothing because making changes means economic sacrifice that corporations and governments won't make. Brunner showed us this future. We walked into it. Social fragmentation and reality breakdown. Characters live in separate information bubbles. Different media, different sources. Can't agree on basic facts. Makes collective action impossible. Society can't fix problems because people can't agree what the problems are. Social media created exactly this. Filter bubbles, echo chambers, political polarization threatening democracy. Shared facts are gone. Consensus reality fractured. Brunner warned media fragmentation would destroy social cohesion. It did. These weren't predictions to celebrate progress. They were warnings about what happens when trends continue without intervention. Brunner was saying in 1968, "This is where you're going and it's bad. Change course or accept the consequences." We didn't change course. We got the consequences. How he saw what everyone else missed. Brunner wasn't psychic. He didn't time travel. He had a method. Understanding the method matters because it shows this was visible to anyone willing to look. Trend analysis. Simple concept. Look at what's happening now. Identify the direction. Ask what happens if it continues. Brunner looked at the 60s and identified the big forces. Population growth, technology advancement, corporate expansion, media spread, social movements, environmental damage. Then he asked, what if these keep going? Population was the easiest. Demographic data showed clear growth. Brunner just calculated where it led by 2010. 7 billion. The math was straightforward. What made it impressive was understanding what 7 billion would mean. Housing shortages, resource strain, psychological pressure, violence. He saw the consequences. Corporate power was obvious if you looked. 60s corporations were growing. Multinationals operating across borders. Military-industrial complex expanding like Eisenhower warned. Brunner asked, what happens when corporations get bigger than governments? What happens when they move faster than regulation? Answer, they take over. That's what General Technics represented. That's what happened. Technology was accelerating visibly. Computers shrinking, getting more powerful. TV everywhere. Satellites launching. Brunner didn't need to predict the exact internet. He understood information technology would change everything about communication and knowledge access. He saw the direction and described where it led using the only tech language he had. Social movements showed where culture was going. Civil rights, sexual revolution, drug culture, anti-war protests. These weren't random. They were fundamental value shifts. Brunner followed them forward. Civil rights continuing means black people in power. Sexual revolution continuing means LGBTQ acceptance. Marijuana use increasing means eventual legalization. Logical extensions of what was already happening. Environmental awareness was emerging. Rachel Carson published Silent Spring in 1962. Started the modern environmental movement. Brunner recognized this was a response to real damage that would get worse as population and industry grew. He projected it forward. Saw resource depletion, pollution, crisis. Not mystical, logical. What separated Brunner from other sci-fi writers wasn't seeing different trends. Lots of writers saw the same patterns. What made Brunner different was following trends to uncomfortable conclusions. Most sci-fi imagined tech solving problems. Brunner imagined tech creating new problems while old ones stayed unsolved. He avoided single-trend thinking. Some writers thought nuclear war would end everything. Others thought space colonies would save us. Brunner understood multiple trends continue simultaneously and interact. Population grows and tech advances and corporations gain power and values change and environment degrades. Everything at once. The future defined by complexity, not single events. His research was serious. Academic papers, economic forecasts, technology reports, sociological studies. Stand on Zanzibar has a real bibliography, real sources from the 60s. He built his future on research, not imagination. The book's structure itself shows his understanding. Fragmented narrative. Information from everywhere. Overwhelming. That wasn't style. That was showing readers what information overload feels like. Describing the subjective experience of modern life before it existed. Brunner understood systems and feedback loops. Overpopulation creates housing shortages, creates stress, creates violence, creates security, creates surveillance, creates anxiety. Trends don't move in straight lines. They interact, amplify, create new problems from old ones. He saw the whole system, not isolated parts. Systems thinking. That's what Brunner had that most people lacked. He didn't look at developments separately. Population affects economics, affects politics, affects technology, affects culture. Everything connects. Most people in 1968 thought about these separately. Brunner thought about them as one interconnected system. The method was simple. Identify trends, research drivers, understand interactions, project outcomes. Brunner did the work, paid attention, thought systematically. That's why he saw decades ahead. The disturbing truth is anyone willing to do this work could have seen the same future. The information existed. The trends were visible. What was rare wasn't ability but willingness. Brunner's 2010 wasn't appealing. Crowded, corporate-controlled, environmentally damaged, psychologically stressed. Most people wanted optimistic visions. Brunner gave them truth. What this means for 2025 and what's coming. We're in 2025, 15 years past Brunner's setting. The trajectory hasn't stopped. The trends are still moving. If his method worked for seeing 2010 from 1968, what does it show us about where we're going now? Population keeps growing. Past 8 billion. Projections say 9 billion in the 2030s. Maybe 10 billion by 2050. Resource strain intensifying. Water shortages spreading. Arable land under pressure. Housing crisis worsening. Psychological stress manifesting exactly as Brunner predicted. Mass violence. Social fragmentation. The trend continues. Corporate power accelerating beyond what Brunner imagined. Tech companies mediate most human communication. Control modern infrastructure. Governments can't regulate them. Companies are wealthier, more sophisticated, operate globally while governments stay national. The trend Brunner identified continues. No sign of reversal. Technology racing past human understanding. AI systems write code, create art, diagnose disease, make decisions affecting millions. Systems getting more sophisticated and less transparent. We're going deeper into Brunner's world where humans rely on systems they don't understand. Trends speeding up, not slowing down. Genetic engineering advancing fast. CRISPR makes modifications simple and cheap. Enhancement debates aren't hypothetical anymore. Real labs. Real technology. Within 10 years, genetic modification of human embryos will probably be commercially available somewhere. Questions Brunner raised in 1968 are urgent practical concerns now. Environmental collapse accelerating. Climate effects visible and worsening. Extreme weather normalizing. Oceans warming. Ice melting. Species extinct at mass extinction rates. Scientists' warnings matching Brunner's projections. Trend line clear and not improving. Social fragmentation deepening. Political polarization threatening democracy in multiple countries. Shared reality broken. Communities in separate information ecosystems with incompatible worldviews. Fragmentation Brunner described worsened by social media. No consensus means it continues. Surveillance ubiquitous and expanding. Facial recognition in public spaces. Data collection comprehensive. AI analyzing behavior to predict actions. Not just government. Built into corporate business models. Trend toward more monitoring, not less. Where does this lead? Apply Brunner's method. Identify trends. Project outcomes. Next 25 years? Population grows until environmental or resource constraints force slowdown. Most likely not catastrophic collapse but grinding pressure. Higher costs. Resource competition. Migration from stressed regions. Social tension from overcrowding. Corporate power consolidates unless governments take dramatic action. Unlikely given corporate influence over politics. Few dozen companies controlling global economy. National governments struggling because real power lies with entities beyond their jurisdiction. AI becomes more capable and more opaque. Humans rely on AI for critical decisions while understanding it less. Question isn't whether this happens but how society adapts to depending on intelligence it doesn't understand. Genetic modification becomes available. Initially expensive. Creates biological division between enhanced and unenhanced populations. Potentially most destabilizing trend because it threatens permanent biological inequality. Environmental damage continues until it forces adaptation. Climate refugees in millions. Water and food security major geopolitical issues. Wealthy regions building barriers against people fleeing collapse in poorer regions. Social fragmentation persists until major crisis forces unity or society breaks apart into separate communities that stop pretending to share common ground. Surveillance expands until complete and permanent. Privacy becomes luxury good only wealthy can afford. Grim trajectory. Same one Brunner identified in 1968. Question is whether it's inevitable. Brunner suggested it wasn't. Point of showing the future wasn't saying it's predetermined but warning this is where current trends lead unless something changes trajectory. What would need to change? Population stabilize through voluntary means not crisis. Corporate power checked through international coordination and real regulation. Technology development with ethical frameworks and democratic oversight. Genetic modification with international agreements preventing biological inequality. Environmental damage with immediate comprehensive action despite economic costs. Social fragmentation with efforts rebuilding shared reality and common purpose. Surveillance with legal limits and enforcement. None impossible. All difficult. Difficulty is why they haven't happened. These changes require short-term sacrifice for long-term benefit. Cooperation across competitive interests. Believing future matters more than present. Brunner showed us the future in 1968. We got exactly what he predicted because we didn't change course. Still on same trajectory. Trends still moving. Warnings still relevant. The manuscript saw 2025 coming. Question is whether we finally listen or whether someone in 2075 looks back at Brunner's predictions and marvels at how accurately he predicted their world too. Trends continue until something stops them. That's how trends work. That's what Brunner understood. That's what he tried to tell us. We didn't listen then. Consequences are everywhere now. Whether we listen going forward determines what comes next.